Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. It is Friday, and we are back with another KSA, and we have brought in Eric to see if we can talk him into making more deals. So our most recent
It probably won't be that
two-parter,
hard, honestly.
right?
Just
Yeah, our most recent two-parter, pretty big shifts in terms of meeting a new villain and in meeting a new mysterious strange entity
Mhm.
and various things like that. So one of the questions that seems the most obvious way to talk about Ari's experience here actually comes from RA. RA asks, is making deals with powerful entities common in your games? Is it Ari specific? Is it Eric specific? Or is it just happenstance that it's happened in this campaign?
I thought about that, and like in Eberron Renewed, campaign one,
Mhm.
we had, but that's just warlocks. I feel like that's not
Yeah,
like if you're playing a warlock, then that should be part of the character,
right.
in my humble opinion. Um, so I don't think it's specific. Like none of the people in my home game have a deal with a crazy entity. Nobody in Eberron Renewed campaign two does. I get to play so rarely that maybe it's a thing when I play characters, but yeah, I think it's just an RE specific deal. Um,
I think,
because yeah,
oh,
go
good.
ahead.
I
No.
was, I was going to say, I think there's a third option here, which is it Philip specific that might be closer to the mark because I was thinking through it and in my home game, the big long campaign with the Mummy's Mask, I ended up having a cleric of Sarenrae die and come back as essentially a revenant, though with a Sarenrae theme instead of a Raven Queen theme. I had another character make a deal with the Raven Queen. That was player
Yeah.
impetus. In our Patreon game, we had a character get killed, and she came back by becoming a warlock, essentially by making a deal with an outsider. And in my current home game, well, okay, my current home game is based on the Pathfinder Kingmaker adventure path,
Okay.
which has a lot of Fae in it, and I feel like if you've got Fae, you've got deals.
Yep.
Um, so that comes along. So it may be me and not anything to do with you or this campaign.
I mean, I think in specifically in the case of Ari, like Ari's ethos is very much community over the individual self. Like Ari feels like aberrant marks are stronger together, and so we need to work together, and we need to work with the outside world in order to be able to exist. And so I think when
Right.
you get outside of the supernatural into Ari making the deal with the swords of Karn, I mean, yeah, that's like you got to work with people if
Right.
you want to. Like no person is an island unto themselves, and so that's the
I mean,
Ari
maybe
doesn't have
Ezreal.
money. Like Ari can't pay people to do stuff, so all he
Right.
has is favor. And
Right.
so yeah, that's his go-to, and he's never, I in his backstory, he's never had money. Like I
Right.
envision it being very much a trade-based economy with the Korvar of like, what do you need, what can we do in exchange for these things, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's just that. And then also I like my character being tied to things, to having complications, and making it easier for Philip to be like, oh, okay, here's something for Ari to have to deal with now. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's kind of why Ari's in the pickle that he is in all the time. So
Yeah, this is maybe the first time I've gotten a character embroiled with two very different supernatural entities at once.
yeah.
And so this will be interesting. I have some thoughts on how it's going to go because I don't want it to become I don't want it to be trying to date two supernatural archfey at the same time.
Ari's into
Um,
that, so I'm, but no, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah. So
Um,
I have
well,
some. I mean, that obviously, Eberron people. I mean, if you're not an Eberron fan, then saying the name of this entity doesn't do anything for you. And if you are an Eberron fan, you probably already worked out
if you're
that
a
we
critical
brought the
role
trap.
playing, it'll have
Well,
meaning
that's
also.
true.
Just
That's true. Critical Role did take this character, although with a very weird twist.
yeah,
Uh, we've just brought the Traveler in, which is one of the more recognizable deities in Eberron, or at least sort of deity. Like no one's really sure. Um, and the agenda of something like the Traveler is very different from the agenda of something like the Forgotten Prince. And so
yeah,
the the mantra is beware the gifts of the Traveler, and that doesn't you necessarily mean because the Traveler will make you do something in return. It just means you don't know why the Traveler does things.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, and I had a very fun conversation during our Patreon game this past week, which you were not in attendance for, and we talked about the apparent similarities between Ari and Barrick, your character
mm,
from the first campaign of uh, Eberron Renewed. We're both warlocks, both half elves, both like a lot of hexblades, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't even know if I like had thought about it until this conversation that you and I are very similar in a lot of ways, but I feel
yeah.
like one big deviation a lot of times is the types of stories we enjoy.
Hmm.
I mean, we both like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that,
Sure.
but like there are often times where I'll be really into a TV show and Philip bounced off of it the first episode because he didn't like the story.
Yeah.
Like Walking Dead for a while. Um, and I'm not a grimdark person, but I ran I ran a game for Barrick that I would have wanted to play in, and that's not the type of story that you wanted for your character a lot of the times. And so, but for Ari, like it's very
Hmm.
apparent, like I'm a I'm a masochist when it comes to, or a sadist. I don't know. Am I
Right.
Ari? Like,
Yeah.
um, um, like I love introducing complications for my character and making
Yeah.
things difficult and making impossible decisions. Make it like there are plenty of times where looking back on the first campaign of Eberron Renewed where I presented like a juicy trolley problem-esque for Barrick, and looking back on it, you hated it. You were not interested in all in that story and like that scenario, whereas me as a player, I'm like, yes, like make me suffer. So yeah. um
um,
so sorry for
no.
making your character miserable.
It led some very interesting places. We
Yeah,
told a cool overall story.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, well, and that's I mean that's the other thing is you gotta like with Esri. Um, there's a line. I don't know how to advise walking it or anything, but there's a line as a GM when you're going to try and introduce this kind of super powerful entity like we've done with, well, the Forgotten Prince kind of came packaged with Ari, but also now the Traveler, and before that Arandis, Harazi to a degree.
yeah, whatever the heck's
Uh,
going on with Pog.
yeah, sure, the Silver Flame with Pog. Yeah, the you can either decide what the entity's personality and character traits are and make them act exclusively in that way, and either the player goes along with it or the player doesn't go along with it, or you can kind of craft it towards the player. When I had Arandis decide to bring Esri back, when I used Arandis to do that, on the one hand it was very in character of her to not put a deal in that the existence of the mark of death in the material world is a big win for her
Yeah,
already.
Esri is already
Um,
what she wants, like
right.
just go forth and populate the earth kind of thing.
But also, I was absolutely certain that if I pitched it as a "and you owe me in an unspecified way." Mwahahaha. RA would have said flatly, well, Esri would have flatly said no and just died. And
Yeah.
that would have been more boring. Um, and I don't necessarily think that's an RA thing. I think that's who Esri is. Because I've definitely played characters for RA who would absolutely go for the deal. Well, I've got RA's character in my home game is almost Esri like in his willingness to make, or almost Ari like in his willingness to make deals with Archfey.
Yeah.
So there's but it was a very different character type, and so yeah, you've kind of got to decide: is this just I want to give the player an opportunity to do this, or I really want to introduce this to the story? And if you really want to introduce it to the story, you need to present it in a way that the player character can reasonably say yes.
Yeah.
So you kind of some tailoring that goes with that. But apparently, I think it's definitely. I think the answer is that it's a me thing because everybody's got some sort of entity tagging along with them
Yeah.
um, at the moment. And part of it is I'm trying to throw out. Part of it I'm really enjoying. There's like a subplot that's been going along very much in the background that's come along ever since Shade made this comment that she believes that the Forest Queen gave her her mark.
Yeah.
Um, and I've kind of enjoyed playing with the notion that that could be true, but also other beings seem to have been able to affect y'all's mark. Because over time, the Forgotten
Yeah.
Prince affected your mark. Now the Traveler has affected your mark. Um, so I'm kind of enjoying this little the unknown of what aberrant marks are.
Hmm.
And I've got a couple of ideas of where to take that. I'm not 100% sure that I want to land on any kind of real answer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would be as fun as
Hmm.
allowing it to be a lingering mystery whenever the story ends.
Yeah.
All right, so we have several questions today. First off, from Laura: what were Ari's thoughts in casting suggestion on Tommel? Was it just to get out of the immediate situation, or did he think it would help work in any long term way? I.e., Ari wants to save Tommel again, right? Right?
So, after the most recent interaction with the I'm Colseer's gang of misfits, which is their official canonical name.
Yep.
Update the wiki. Um, Seeing Tommel and seeing Tommel like intercede on their behalf, and the way Tommel spoke during the fight, and yada yada yada, it is very clear to Ari and to a certain extent Eric that the best real world uh, correlation that I can make for the situation Tommel is Tommel's in a cult. Like Tommel is in an isolated situation where he has been told the world has to work a certain way and he has to act a certain way in order to operate safely within that world. So Ari's thought with suggestion was the only way to save Tommel is to get him out of that situation. Because these little like back and forth that we have, and then Tommel scurries off to go be with Colseer for a couple more months, obviously is never going to do any good. You're not going to break someone's resolve over the course of in universe 45 seconds before you start punching each other in the face. Um, so Ari's thoughts were, if I can just get him to hesitate long enough for them to leave him, that's the only way to save Tommel. And it didn't work. So probably not going to save Tommel. But um but that because, and this might not be true, this is Ari slash Eric's reading the situation. The next time we see Tommel's probably going to be more radicalized, like potentially. Tommel's going to be further into this whole thing. And that might not be true. Tommel might have something else going on. But with the combination of Colseer and Mirren being in Tommel's ears while he's away from the party, there's just no way that we can overcome that without getting alone time with Tommel. And if that can't happen, then the rest of the party's going to do to Tommel what they've wanted to do for a long time. So, yeah. But yeah, that was kind of Ari's Hail Mary there at the end of the encounter. Was I was like, I'm going like Super Saiyan. I could blast Tommel, but let's do the interesting thing rather than the obvious thing. So
Yeah, and it is interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing where that takes us.
what are your thoughts on suggestion as a spell, Philip?
I think suggestion needs to be in any future version of the spell. I think suggestion just needs a little bit more clear wording.
Yeah,
Um, because with a spell like command, that you've got a very clear set of parameters. It's an actual, just straight up compulsion,
yeah,
but it's one word.
yeah,
Suggestion is sort of a compulsion. I mean, they're gonna do it, but it's the way it talks about the spell suggests that it is a slightly softer form of compulsion,
yeah,
but it has this just incredibly open-ended duration.
yeah. 8 hours,
Um
I think, is
eight
the as
eight
long as you can
hours.
concentrate. Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, if we're talking about a thing like uh you're trying to get the guards off the gate for a minute, and so I suggest that you go make sure the mayor is safe.
yeah,
um that fits and makes very firm things, but when you use it, and you used it entirely within the bounds of the spell, when you use it and say we've got to stop this or something like that, which is a
yeah.
perfectly legitimate use of the spell as the rules are written, it leaves very open what counts as
What's the
stopping this. Like,
action? Yeah,
yeah, if the combat had gone on, would Tommel hesitating for a round fulfill it because he technically stopped?
yeah,
Like, so what fulfills the end of it? And so I feel like the spell needs either a different kind of duration, or it needs some just clearer wording on what limitations there are on the nature of the suggestion. It just feels like it needs a little bit more
yeah,
tightness.
yeah,
It's a very loose spell, and it's great. It's very, and it can be very, very cool. It's just an especially loose spell in a combat situation. Honestly, I would even say if you had a a limiting factor on it where it was like, um I don't know, like charm person, where it's kind of screwed up if you've been charm person doesn't really work if you've been stabbing their friends in front of them,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you can't, stab all their friends to death and then charm.
yeah, yeah,
Or I think there's a limit. There's some kind of limitation on charm person like that. Like if suggestion had something like that, um, that kind of suggests this is an out of combat spell or something, I think
yeah,
it would be clearer. So I just think it's a little loose.
yeah. Okay.
It's not a it's not a spell I hate, and it's not a spell that's like I want this out of my game or something like that. It's not like
It's not going to get
polymorph.
added to the ban list with polymorph for the second
Yeah,
campaign.
right. Um, I just wish that it was worded in a more clear way, so
Yeah,
that it doesn't fall entirely on the GM to interpret whether this is a valid usage and whether I have fulfilled the necessity of the spell. Because I could
yeah,
totally, I feel like if the combat had gone on and I have Tom will just hesitate for an action and then go again, it feels like, I don't know, it feels like I'm undermining the narrative. It feels like
hmm,
I'm being legalistic with you in some way, and I don't like
yeah,
that, because the
yeah,
narrative of it was really cool. I liked it narratively a lot. So that, yeah, that's what sort of my issue with it is, just it puts the GM into a place where it'd be very easy to fall into an adversarial,
yeah. Totally.
argumentative kind of thing, and I don't like
Gotcha. Yeah,
when you're put in that way.
fair enough.
um uh Laura would also like to know why Ari doesn't use any random tables.
Ari's life is a random table. What are you talking about? Um, uh, no, I mean, if there was a uh, a tabletop RPG canonically within the world of Eberron, then I'm sure Ari would love random tables because Ari loves chaos. So
That's true. I'm trying to think if there are, other than the chaos magic sorcerer. I think that's the only character class that gets that has a random table baked into it.
the wild magic barbarian also
Ah,
gets
yeah,
like yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's
Um, Emily has a few questions. Emily asks, first of all, what sort of answers were you expecting when Ari called out for help from the Forgotten Prince? Obviously, you weren't
I,
expecting me to pull the Traveler out of nowhere, but
obviously not. So I to kind of pull the curtain back, when this campaign first started, Philip told us that a Sybaris mark would be a feat with a 10th level prereq. And so it was like, okay, if we want to do that, that's kind of, and so I had told Philip, hey, I'm interested in that once the time came and I was about to get another feat. And then proceeded to entirely forget that I had told Philip that. So I was just in my oblivious little self, like thinking, oh, when we level up, I could take this feat or this feat or this feat. Um, and so when I made the decision to call out to the prince in that moment, it was not a narrative setup for Philip. And I honestly, if you go back and watch the recording, while Philip's thinking and everyone else is talking, I get this very fatalistic look on my face. I'm like, oh no, I know what I would do. I know what I would do. I thought for a brief moment that the prince was going to show up and be like, okay, you need help? Well, you can have this back, and hands me the sword. I was just like, oh no. Like,
oh man,
that's.
that would be killer. Yeah.
It's like, not that though. So that's where my mind went of like, oh yeah, you gave me this, you can use it when you want. um so yeah, that's what I feared. In terms of what I was expecting, nothing. I was grasping at straws at that point, trying to figure out, like, I was enjoying doing the role play from the other side of the plane, but at the same time, and this is where my brain, in terms of satisfying my own narrative wants for my character and the story being told versus being mechanically helpful to the rest of the players. I was like, I can't just keep floating around out here. Like, things are going bad on the other side. Like, Ari, like, the action economy requires Ari to be back in this fight. So I need to figure out something to try and get back. So that's why I tried dive bombing my own body. If nothing happened after I called out to the prince, I was going to try to possess Mirren's body was my next play.
Oh,
That's what I was
that'd
going to
be
try.
cool.
Yeah. So I had a list of things round by round that I was going to try to do to get back into the fight. But yeah, I thought I'll try calling out to the prince and let Philip deal with it, and Philip dealt with it. So
Delightful. Oh, that possessed Mirren. That's a cool notion. I don't know what I would have had the contest be, but that'd be a fun thing to mess around with. Um, Emily also asks, is there a reason why Ari didn't tell Thora about his deal with the figure in the travel stained cloak?
there is a lot going on. Thora has a lot on her plate, and there's nothing that Thora can do about that right now. So why add that additional stress? Ari told her that something happened, and hey, we'll talk about it later, but it does nobody any good to talk about it right now because you're just going to freak out. So we'll talk about it once there's not 100 people in our foyer needing food and shelter, and like we go
Right.
back to classes as normal. Then I'll tell you I made an open-ended deal with a god. But for now, it's purely, and this might be wrong of Ari, but it's Ari trying to um just trying to save Thora the burden without giving Thora that option, which may be unfair, but that's how Ari is choosing to deal with it, because he also knew we're coming back to tell her that Kolsir has risen and Tommel and Mirren are up to no good. Like, we were about to come dump a lot of stuff on her plate.
Right.
the Traveler didn't need to be one of them. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Emily asks, Philip, had Shade died when she touched the trap and or cursed sarcophagus, what would have happened to Cal? That's an interesting question. I actually like. There's this brief moment. I don't know if it read on my face. There's this brief moment of panic, because I had made a note, symbol of death um, on the sarcophagus. There's this brief moment where it occurred to me, oh crap, is this one of those spells where if a person is reduced to 0 by it, it's like finger of death, where they
Yeah.
rise as a
Just,
zombie, like they're just dead, dead, dead.
yeah. Yeah.
And I had this just terrible moment of panic that is what had happened. Luckily, it's not. And luckily, they're high enough level that she can go 52 hit points below 0 and be all right. But as to your question, what would have happened to Cal? I think that probably would have been a conversation I had with Casey, as to what became of Cal. I don't view Cal as like symbiotically attached to Shade or anything, obviously. A simple answer would be Cal returns to the Feywild, and lives out his days as a Fey Panther. But probably I would have had that conversation with Casey to see whether she thought it would be more fun if Cal stuck around at the mansion and continued to be part of it, or went and lived in the Grove with River, or
That's where
something.
my mind went, is like
Yeah,
become River's guardian kind of thing, like attached to the hip with her.
yeah.
But
Well, and also it would depend on what Casey wanted to do
yeah.
after Shade's death, uh, because if Casey wanted to pick up another character, if Casey wanted to pick up one of the NPCs that's been going up, Casey wanted to play River. Maybe she wants to play River and have Cal as a companion. Maybe she wants to uh, play, I don't know, Harish or something like that. Like, it just depends on what Casey wanted to do next.
Harazi, that's
Yeah. So it would be, for me, anything that's specifically tied to a player character, whether it's their animal companion, some sort of special weapon they have, family members, or even NPCs that they've just become really, really closely attached to. Uh, I would want player input on that if it became relevant as to what becomes of them, because again, ultimately, I like D&D as a group storytelling exercise, and so I want, if a player character dies, I want that story to still find an ending that satisfies the player,
Yeah.
because as much as it's my story, it's very much their story as well. So that would have been a conversation with Casey. Next time I get Casey on, ask her what she would want to do. What would if Shade had a will? What would Shade's will say about Cal? Um, Liz asks, not anything specific, but what would your favorite one sentence out of context spoiler that would mean nothing to someone who hasn't watched the show, but everything to someone who has? I don't know if Liz watches the show. Maybe this is a bit just specifically for Liz. Mine, I'd be interested to know what Eric's would be. Mine would be, his mark isn't actually aberrant.
Nice. Oh, I'm trying to. The lighthouse is back. I think that's it.
Yeah.
What in? Who knows?
That's good.
It's like an exercise in those explain a story badly things.
Yes. And then Jody asks, 2 weeks left until Gamer Nation Con. Y'all ready?
Nope.
Have you got your session worked out yet?
I need to build the characters, but I have the concept. The theme for Gamer Nation Con, for those that don't know, it's a convention that the podcast network that Eberron Renewed is a part of, D20 Radio, puts on every year. And I run a game for one of the Kickstarter tiers, and it's 80s themed, and I'm doing the Russians invade and they must be fought off by a cast of 80s iconic movie characters a la Marty McFly, etc. So yeah,
Awesome.
that's I was gonna do like golden era WWF stuff, like those stories where like the real life like stunt people have to like do the thing,
Yeah.
but I wasn't sure if there would be the broad appeal of like play as Ric Flair fighting Russians, so I went with something a bit more mainstream. So
That's cool. That's cool. Who are your planned 80s heroes?
So obviously Marty McFly being a big one. I'm thinking maybe He-Man
Hmm.
as a big
Nice.
one would be fun. One of the Thundercats
Sure.
be iconically good. I thought a Transformer, but I don't want to like have a mech amongst like a party like, and I also don't want to shrink the Transformer way
Yeah.
down, if that makes sense. And then I also thought about like getting just some um like sitcom characters, like just out of their depth, but yeah. So we'll see. We'll see.
You could have someone be like Kit from Knight Rider. Their
Yeah.
car, like
Yep.
an awakened vehicle.
Yep. That would be fun.
Um,
That would be very fun.
yeah.
So
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
yeah,
Are you doing it as Genesis or are you doing it as 5e?
5e. So
Neat.
yep.
Well, that's very exciting. I don't have anything to prepare. I did not volunteer myself to play a game because I fear strangers, and so I don't volunteer myself to run a game that might be full of people I don't know. Um, I have run a couple of things. I guess I've run one game in the past that I just sort of made up on the fly, and that was fun. But I don't usually come prepared to run things. I usually come and actually I mostly play a lot of board games at Gamer Nation Con, and
Yep.
mostly it's me shopping board games for future purchases.
Yep.
But yes, I'm excited. It's going to be fun to see everyone. It'll be fun to play a bunch of board games, and I'm looking forward to seeing Eric's wild and crazy 80s collection. This is your first time that you haven't designed your thing around Eberron,
It's true.
I
Yep.
believe. Yeah.
Switching it up. So
Cool.
it was the first time they did a theme that I couldn't
Yeah,
really
I don't know how you would
like.
do Eberron in the 80s. I mean,
The
it's the
980s, like
'80s.
said it during the last
Uh,
war. Yeah.
yeah, but that's a stretch. Yeah, so
So
cool. Well, that is all of our questions for this week. Thank you all so much for submitting questions. We always have a good time with this. New episodes of Khyber Shards will drop every Friday, and new episodes of Khyber Shards drop every Monday. New Khyber Shards answers every Friday. You want to hear more of me and Eric playing RPGs and occasionally talking about the RPGs that we have played. You can check out the Eberron Renewed podcast on all of your favorite podcasting applications. And until next time, thanks for rolling with us.